You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, episode 76. Brian and Mandy cross the streams.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 76 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So, I spent my last weekend watching a lot of streaming television, and we're going to talk about this week. And I wanted to start out with Nosferatu, which ended this Sunday. And I know you're not completely caught up on it yet. But we can definitely talk about what we think so far, since you're mostly through it, and I didn't, in fact, happen to watch all of it. So, what do you think so far?
I'm very excited. I'm happy, as being, having read the book, being a fan of Joe Hill.
Right.
I'm very happy with what they did with it. I haven't really been too disappointed with the changes that they've made or anything. I can see what they did was necessary to make it television ready, to make it ready for this bigger audience. Kind of simplified things in a way, not as complicated, like the inscapes, they're not as complicated as they're described in the book, but I'm absolutely fine with that. So it's really exciting. I like everything they've done with it. What they've done with the characters made them a little different, and the actors are just fantastic. And I mean, the parents, Vic's parents they are exactly, what I picture. And I think they're the most spot on, portrayals in this world that, has been created, but, between AMC and Joe Hill, that they've created this great world.
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously bringing Joe Hill in as an executive producer, I mean, that completely makes sense. And, you definitely get that feeling of blue collar horror that you don't really see. And it really plays into the tone and the theme of what we've seen so far. And one thing definitely I can say, which I don't think is as much of a spoiler, I mean, obviously by the end they've set up to continue. So, and I think they've already said there's going to be a season 2 of Nosferatu.
Yep.
It's already been
renewed.
It's already been renewed. And so they've very well set up what's going to be happening for season 2. And like you said before, in the book you have the adult version of of that
Vic.
of Vic, of that character, and she is, I can see where they can probably play her off more adult the second season and go more into her adult life. And like I said, this is all basically Vic is a senior in high school,
right?
And, of course, there's a lot more in the book, obviously. And so I figured we'll see a lot more of that in season 2. But, I have to say, I've enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not enamored, totally in love with it. I really liked it, I would say. And, of course, AMC, they're really pushing to be the horror channel, because they've come out with so much stuff along with, of course, they're going to have 3 different television versions of The Walking Dead going, because they're coming out with a new one. And of course, The Terror, which is now turned into a series. And now they're
so excited about that.
Yeah. That second season looks really interesting. I guess it's going to, each season's going to be its own thing, because of course The Terror was based off the book The Terror, and this one is called INFAMY, and it's going to have, it looks like it's going to have a lot to do with Japanese culture and
the internment camps
camps.
As if those weren't horrible enough, we're going to add this. We're going to add this supernatural element on top of it.
Yeah, let's make it even worse. And
but I think we're going to get some really interesting, seeing Japanese demons, which have this whole other, monsterness to them, and we really, outside of anime, I can barely, maybe we've got a couple like The Grudge or something along those lines, but I think this is really going to go into some of the culturisms of it, and like there are certain rules that you have to follow.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I can say for sure is that with Japanese culture, especially ghosts and vengeful spirits, they're not to be messed with, because usually in those type of stories, it's like, once they've fixated on something, you can't get rid of them. You're pretty much done. I mean, people have seen The Ring or Ringu, if you've seen the original Japanese version of it. It's like once you've gone down the road, you're done. That's it. You're finished.
Yeah, and there's certain rules. I mean, we have a few of our own, as far as like, if you look in the mirror and, you say Bloody Mary, then you call forth Bloody Mary. But as far as Japanese demons and ghosts go, like even their architecture is designed to, send their ghosts away, because ghosts don't like, right angles. So they have these, or they don't like curves. So they have these angles in their architecture to sweep the ghosts away. And if you greet them a certain way, they can't hurt you as long as you're polite. And all these crazy rules, or if you walk backwards over a bridge, then they can't get you. There's all kinds of great ceremony, I think, when it comes to certain kinds of ghosts. And we've adopted that a little bit, I think. Was Darkness Falls about the Tooth Fairy? Yeah, I think that was, you can't look at her. I think that was very much inspired by those old stories about demons and ghosts, and so I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh yeah, I mean, in Western culture, we have a little bit of these type of folk tales, which we've kind of gotten away from. I mean, at this point, our vampires don't tend to be, they're not anal retentive to the point where they have to count things,
right? And, some of them even walk in the sunlight now, so that was
well, we don't talk about that so much.
Oh, and some of them sparkle. You're right, some of them sparkle in the sunlight.
That's right.
Although I have this theory of mine, I guess it could be called a fan theory, is that the ultimate secret of the Twilight vampires is that they're not vampires, that they are fairies. And, the big vampire council knows this, and they've just been keeping it a secret, because it's very much like fairy lore, is that fairies glow, and they also consume, bodily fluids and live forever. So they're very much, to me, I mean, they very much follow fairy lore.
Well, you've heard it here first, folks. This is what the vampires didn't want you to hear. This is what they've been trying to hide from you all along. They're fae.
The big vampire mafia in the Twilight books are really fae.
There you go. So you found it out here first, folks. But what was funny was this was my binging weekend, and I had to put a kibosh on my binging to watch the season finale of Nosferatu, and then go back to The Boys, which you've not seen yet.
I have not. Superheroes.
And there you go. And this is another Amazon show. Of course, we talked about Good Omens and how much we enjoyed that series. And so I was looking forward to seeing The Boys. When I saw the first trailer, there's a second trailer, which I'll say right now, if you've not seen the show yet, avoid the second trailer. Not that it's really spoilery, but I'm glad I went into it even not seeing the second trailer. There's a bunch of stuff I just didn't want to know. And like I said, the second trailer wasn't all that spoilery, but I really wanted to go in completely.
Tabula rasa.
Exactly. Yeah. I did not want to know anything going into it, really. I just needed to know, hey, there's superheroes and just kind of messed up. And that you basically had me sold at that point. Now, I will say that, and this was something I said on my Facebook page when I was talking about watching the show, is that if you read comics like Martial Law or you're familiar with The Watchmen, this is not exactly new territory, obviously. The superheroes are messed up when you look at them, at a certain light, is pretty much familiar territory if you're familiar with those works and other ones as well. But I do like the take that they had for this. There's a lot of, it's very, I would even say more than Watchmen, it's more reality based. Because there's a lot, if you had superpowers in this world, there are certain things that would happen. There's a political aspect to a lot of it. There's a lot of people getting into it who want to make a difference, and then they get jaded as they go in, and things like that. Like I said, I am not going to go into any kind of spoilers at all, because you do not want to be spoiled on this. Okay. There are so many twists and turns and just weird things that happen. like I said, there's one thing that's given away in the trailer that I'm so glad I didn't see coming, because it's one of those major shock moments that you just don't want to know about it going in.
Okay.
And for the people who have seen this, prepare to laugh at this pun. It has more impact that way. For the people who've seen it, they know they're right now going, no, you did no. But people talk about how messed up it is. Again, for somebody who's watched as much messed up stuff as I have, I wasn't as appalled by some of this stuff, but there's, like I said, there's certain things in it that are kind of rough. And one thing I'll definitely say about it is there's a whodunits thread that kind of runs through it, because there's things going on in the background, and that you're wondering who's pulling the strings of certain things. And but most of what I'd love to say about this, I couldn't say without there being spoilers. So I'm going to refrain from that at this time. I think eventually, after you've seen it, I do want to have a spoilers discussion about it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. And once again, Amazon has knocked it out of the park with their original series. And I mean, they've been bringing out a lot of great original series recently. And I mean, I got Amazon Prime anyway, and I've been going back and checking out other stuff that I've been meaning to watch, like The Tick, which I had not seen. I had not seen their version, of The Tick.
I'd heard that it was good, but I haven't watched it.
I've finished. I've binged watched the first season of it. Okay. There's a second season, and then I think it got canceled after the second season. But I enjoyed the heck out of it. It's more, I will say, for The Tick, it's more Arthur centric than it is Tick centric. The Tick is, in a real sense, he's sort of like a secondary character, at least in the first season.
It always kind of, with the cartoon anyway, and I can't remember if I finished the Patrick Warburton one, but it always did seem like Arthur's story and his interactions with the Tick, and the way he views the Tick and the people around him. And
yeah, well, again, I don't want to go into any spoilers for the Tick, but you give Arthur at the beginning, you give him a real reason to want to get involved in superhero-y stuff without necessarily wanting to be a superhero. We'll just say superheroes ruined his life.
Oh.
I mean, in a really, really bad way. And when you see him, he's in a really bad place. We'll just say that. It's, in some ways, it's a little bit darker than the cartoon. Although the comic book, there were some dark moments in there, but the comedy is definitely there. And of course, when you have the creator, Ben Eklund, executive producing, when you bring the people who created it in to work on it, you're going to get something great. And like I said, if you're familiar with The Tick, whether the comic books or the animated series or the first live action series, you're going to be getting something brand new, and it's definitely worth a watch. But again, that'll be something, maybe we can talk spoilery about when once I've finished it. If you get a chance to watch it, we'll definitely talk about that. But what I wanted to end the podcast with is, since we were talking a lot about streaming services, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on with these with streaming services.
Oh yeah.
And I find it interesting about the different streaming services coming out and how things have changed over the last few years or so with streaming, because streaming is really blowing up right now.
Oh yeah.
And of course, it all started out with Netflix, and Netflix, it became a meme to one point, Netflix and chill, which has nothing to do with Netflix or chilling.
I remember back when Netflix used to send you a real DVD.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. When I first started with Netflix, it was it became the blockbuster killer, because why go out the Blockbuster when you could go into Netflix and get the DVD, and you didn't have to worry about late fees, because you just paid a monthly fee, and you kept the disc for as long as you wanted. And when you were done with it, you sent it back. And I remember in the days, there were discs that I kept for months and months and months and watched and rewatched.
And the one thing I miss about that was all the extras, the DVD extras, which I always loved about DVDs anyway.
But then they decided they wanted to try doing streaming, which at the time people were like, man, streaming's not going to work because who's going to watch some choppy, blurry version of a movie? Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was very much the same thing as the 4-Minute Mile. You know, for the longest time, people thought that
that's impossible.
That's impossible. And then in 1954, Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute. He squeaked by 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds, but it was under 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, after that, everybody's,
Right, everyone, the next day.
Yeah.
Everyone was doing it.
Was it like 1,400 people? Male athletes have been able to run I think right now it's like, it's gone down to like 3 minutes and 43 seconds. I think it's gone at. But until somebody did it, nobody thought you could do it. And until Netflix did a streaming service, nobody thought that a streaming service was viable because one, internet speeds aren't going to be fast enough to make it worth anybody's while. No. Plus the fact that you can't go up against cable. And then Netflix created a structure that made people realize, hey, cable cutting could be a thing. And, now, we talk about how many people are cutting their cables, but the problem Netflix had run into is they created all this great stuff, but now other people are just duplicating what they're doing. And so, they invented it all, but now they're running into problems with everybody else wanting to do the same thing. One of their strengths was the fact that since they were the only game in town, they had all the content. And then they started creating content, and that was powerful. But, now that television stations are not as worried about pulling content off of their main channel, and they're willing to create content for their streaming services that don't show up on their broadcast channels.
They're not worried about, the family hour, the prime time, the Nielsen ratings, or anything like that.
Right, exactly. Because the thing that Netflix discovered, and I think in a real sense, HBO may have discovered this a little bit earlier, is that if you're a subscription service, you don't care what movies people are watching or what parts of your program, or you just need one. If you've got one piece of content that they're willing to pay per month for, it doesn't matter if they don't like the rest of it. So you don't have to have a huge audience. You just have to have an audience willing to pay for your content for that one thing. Mm-hmm. And then you just, draw in people with other stuff. So that allowed places like Netflix and also, of course, HBO to be a little more experimental, where Hollywood had lost that because movies got to be so expensive to make that Hollywood just wasn't willing to take chances on
losing money.
Yeah, or even, they wanted to make sure that, they're going to put out things with intellectual property that people know that they can draw in a big audience. But, places like Netflix, they could be experimental, and it really paid off for them. But now everybody's doing it. Yep. And Netflix, for the first time, I think in their last stockholders meeting, phone call that they did, they had to admit that for the first time in what I want to say like 10 years, they've lost subscriptions.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And the minute they announced that, it was like they dropped the cost, the net worth of Netflix dropped $17 billion. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they're still worth $140 billion. Mm-hmm. So they're not ready to pack up and retire quite yet. Mm-hmm. But it was a major deal because they've never lost subscribers before, at least not to the level that they did. Mm-hmm. I want to say over 100,000 subscribers.
Wow. And
a lot of that's had to do with the fact that other content providers have pulled things away from them so that they can put it on their own channel. And Disney Plus is going to be a major impact on Netflix and Amazon.com, because honestly, the one thing that Netflix had going for them was they had made so much money back in the days when they were the only game in town that it was going to be hard for smaller companies to keep up with them. content-wise or whatever, but then you throw Amazon into the game. Yeah, they have a little bit of money.
Yeah. They're not just dependent on, media or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
They went into streaming, as sort of their side hustle because, of course, Amazon started out, well, we're going to be an online bookstore, which, as a bit of a side, I thought was the dumbest idea ever because I was a book buyer and I knew how I liked to shop for books. And so it really, on paper, it was the dumbest idea ever. But Amazon, they were able to make that work, and then they just turned themselves into the world's biggest store.
Shopping, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like
Don't worry. Once upon a time, someone said that about bottled water. That's the stupidest thing ever.
Well, sometimes it is. I saw bottled water from Mexico once. I just thought that was a dumb idea. But we'll leave that at that. But because of the fact that Amazon certainly has the money to compete with Netflix, and they're able to come up with contracts, they're able to create content, and they're also able to pull content away. But that's been Netflix's biggest issue right now, is the fact that they're losing all kinds of shows, content-wise. And of course, content's always going to be a choke point for any business. You've got to have product. And Netflix, they are willing to take chances, and some of their chances have panned out and some of them haven't. But what I'm really worried about streaming-wise is as the money starts to grow, the same thing, with Hollywood, are these streaming companies going to be less willing to take chances? I mean, Disney's going to be massive. But then the thing about it is, it's all proven IP at this point. What are they doing at Disney Plus that isn't like they're not like guaranteed a home run for? What's the avant-garde thing that they're doing? What's the one thing where they're going to be doing something new? There isn't anything. They're doing these television shows, but they're based off of movies that have been wildly successful. And so Disney Plus is not going to be the innovator. It's going to be these smaller companies that are, they're going to have to innovate to compete. But at the same time, that's where the big risk is. And I think the other big problem we're running into streaming service at this point is now we've got all these different places, and I'm really looking to see who is going to be the one that's going to step in and create that box that's going to allow you to stream all these different services.
Like Roku or Sling or...
Yeah, or I think, Amazon, their Fire Stick may be part of it.
I think even like an Xbox or a PlayStation at one time you could stream on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you still can. I never played video games, so I never had one. Yeah,
the biggest issue that I can see is it's going to have to be a company that's going to be outside of Amazon and all of that, and Amazon and Netflix, because Amazon with Fire Stick, I haven't checked it recently. Now, I think at this point, you can still stream Netflix, but when you have a company, you're not going to allow your competition on your platform. We definitely saw that with the iPhone, because you can get a Kindle app, Amazon Kindle, and read Kindle books, but you can't buy Kindle books on an iPhone because iPhone blocks it because they had their own books app. And so, you had that really weird situation. If you're reading Kindle books on your iPhone, if you want to buy one, you find the book, you've got to put it, you can put it on a list and save it, but then you got to go to a PC and buy it because you can't buy it on an iPhone. Which is a pain. And I mean, there are a lot of steps that we've got to do right now to watch our shows because you have all these separate things. And I'm wondering if something, there's something in the future, some sort of a platform that will allow us to access.
I think it'll have to come down to the smart TVs.
Yeah.
They're just going to have to be capable for, reaching everything. And then, eventually your phone, your TV, just everything. I'm sure to a degree they work together right now, but eventually just everything will have to work together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on my plasma TV, I can watch Netflix, I can watch Amazon, but, there's no plan right now for a Disney Plus app. I think you can do Hulu. And then there's a few small ones that you can do, but, like Shudder, for example, I don't think there's any way really outside of an app that you can watch Shudder, on a smart TV. But again, now we're I wouldn't say we're in the wild west of streaming because now we're getting all these big companies that are getting into it. But now that it's shown to be viable, everybody's kind of jumping into it. And so, I mean, it makes it, like I said, it makes it difficult for these smaller companies to get in. But ultimately, what I'm worried about is if this thing gets too big to be innovative, because you're starting to see that in YouTube right now. Because YouTube, they were built by content creators, these small content creators that had these channels. And now it seems like when you go on to YouTube, it's all about, seeing people, that you'd normally see on television or in movies. They're the ones that get promoted on YouTube. And of course, a lot of these OG creators that help build the platform, they're really upset about it. And I get that. I certainly understand that. I remember YouTube back in the day when it was the Wild West and you could pretty much post anything that you wanted. And you can't do that anymore. You can barely post anything because of, copyright issues. And not saying, that it's all about people trying to steal other people's content. I mean, if you talk about other people's content, it can be really problematic, and you can get a copyright strike pretty easily these days. And so you have to be really careful. But, and YouTube is getting into creating content and, putting that behind a paywall. And so it's really gotten to a place where it's getting more complicated. But definitely, I'm going to be curious to see what Disney Plus does with their platform and to see how things change. Like I said, my hope is that there still be streaming services out there willing to put out new content. Yeah,
you'll have a device that goes on top of your TV that's shaped like mouse ears.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean...
They'll call it the Mouseketeer.
But, content is king for sure. And I would hate to see content become pretty much homogenized, safe content. You have to be willing to take those chances. Otherwise, we don't get Stranger Things, for example, which is a great show.
Right.
That wasn't based off of an IP anybody knew about. It was just people willing to take, the Duffer Brothers willing to take a chance and put stuff out that they wanted to watch. And so what I'm really looking forward to seeing, and I'm hoping that I'm going to see, is I want to see the first innovative, brand new show that shows up on Disney Plus. That thing that came out of left field that we weren't expecting. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know if it's ever going to be. I guess we'll find out. But before we go, just as a quick announcement, just as I guess a teaser is, of course, Mandy, you and I have been talking about some stuff behind the scenes about expanding this channel, and we may have something going. Of course, this is we're recording August the 1st, and I'm thinking by September we may have some announcements to make by the end of August to let you know some things we want to start doing in September. And so keep listening for that. Hopefully we'll have some announcements to make here really soon.
Good teaser.
Good teaser.
Good teaser.
Well, thank you. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 76 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.